Good evening, William. Gonna wait just a minute for a couple more people to join on that normally join, and be starting a fairly short Bible study, I think, tonight. Okay, maybe some more people will join on here in just a minute. I'm gonna record this so a lot of folks don't make it in the evening to make this, so I'm gonna record it. Hope everyone's doing well this evening. I've been doing a series of men's Bible studies, and these were apart from our regular church service, apart from the normal things that I normally do, faith-based. These will be men's studies, and we've got them on our YouTube channel. All the ones I've done so far, based on facts that men need to have in their families and their relationships at work, and hopefully it will be something that you can glean from. And also, a lot of women watch these studies and have gained a lot from them, and there's some sound doctrine there, obviously, that if you're teaching the Bible, it's something that anybody can gain from. But tonight I wanted to call it fox hunting because of the passage that I'm going to use in this. I actually have very little bit of scripture to share tonight, very little bit of Bible verses. We all know that in Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." So I began to think about elements that make people fall away from their faith. Think about people you may have known that through the years they were strong with God, busy in church, appeared to have some type of Christian faith about them, and yet they fell away. Think about someone in your family, friends, someone you went to school with. Maybe you even fell away yourself. Think about the falling away of people. And then when you think about that, I want you to think about the reasons that they fell away. Now, I used that passage out of Proverbs to train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it, because a lot of parents are basing their entire parenting on that one passage. And by that I mean they are basing raising their kids on what they think is going to be the outcome at the end of it. Now, let me just give you a little illustration as a gardener. I have love for gardening. I have a small garden plot. We have several raised beds, and we've got a larger garden plot. We have loved gardening for years. We love growing our own food. And gardening is a long time process, long drawn out process, just like parenting, just like raising children, just like relationships. And I want to bring all those in tonight. When you have a garden, you work the soil. You go out and get your seed, you get whatever you're going to use to build up soil, either fertilizer or compost, manure, whatever you're going to use to build the soil up. And you base everything on the seed. And I can attest to the fact that some seed is no good. Some seed is not what you want to grow. Some seed is not good anymore. There's date on the bag of the seed we buy when it was processed. There is we've got a feed store in town that has open bins of seed, and some of that seed's been in there for years and years, and I don't know that I would buy any and bother with trying to plant it. Some of the bags were dated 2 years ago, the last time I went to buy feed at our co-op. And so if you if you've got something that's no good when you put it in there and you're waiting and waiting, maybe if you're a gardener, you understand this. You put seed in there that's no good and it doesn't grow, you've wasted a bunch of time. And at the end of the growing season, you've got nothing. Then if you're growing the only food you have and you grow it, then you're in trouble, aren't you? Well, we have the luxury nowadays to go to the store and we buy our food. But if you're parenting and you're basing your entire parenting on this one passage, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it, and you believe firmly that you are raising that child in the way he should go, but you don't observe all the angles of it. You don't check backwards and forwards. You go through, let's say, the way that you were raised, or the way that you think they ought to be raised, or the way that the church you attend, their youth group, what they're getting, and you don't do your very best. You don't have but one chance of doing that. In relationships can be going along, and one person will think it's growing and the other person will think it's not working out, and all of a sudden relationships break down. So I want us to go to a passage in Song of Solomon tonight, and I know that's a very odd place for us to look for a men's Bible study, but I want us to really look at this one verse, and I'm going to expound on this just a little bit. Song of Solomon, chapter 2, and verse 15. This is where my title, Fox Hunting, comes from. Take us the foxes, the little foxes that spoil the vines, for our vines have tender grapes. Take us the foxes, the little foxes that spoil the vines, for our vines have tender grapes. So I throw that at you and you say, okay, you've either heard that before or you've not, or you've never really thought much about it, or maybe you have heard of the passage of the little foxes spoil the vines. Maybe that's been shortened, that's what you've heard. If you think about little foxes, little things that destroy, that's what we're going to look at tonight. We're going to talk about little things that destroy someone's faith, little things that little by little they tear down. If you take any man and woman who ended in divorce, any relationship that broke up, anything like that didn't work out, if you take someone who ended up quitting a job because things were bad there, it was never one thing. It was never one thing, guys. There was not one element that caused that person to quit that job, to break up that marriage, or for a child to walk away from God after they've been raised in church. It's not just one thing. It's the little foxes that spoil the vines. Now, let me give you a little background of this in Song of Solomon. She says, take us the foxes, the little foxes that spoil the vines, for our vines have tender grapes. And in this passage, the relationship is new. This is just the second chapter. And you know, Song of Solomon is a love story between a man and a woman, and it's an analogy between Christ and the church. Israel knew it. It was between God and Israel. We know it was between Christ and the church. And so when you look at this relationship is new. You look in what they're saying, it's things are going along good, and I'm going to paraphrase, things are going along well. We need to be very careful that we don't let the little things come between us, that we don't let things come in and destroy us. Now think about that very carefully. Any relationship you've had, a man to a woman, you know, co-workers, whatever, you're building friendships or whatever, and things start to being destroyed. They're never destroyed by one event. People don't walk away from God because of one event, even if it's a tragic event. I know a lot of times people have something tragic that happens in their lives. They have a child that gets killed, or they have a spouse that dies, or they have, you know, they're going along and they lose their job and they get in financial distress. Whatever the tragedy is, people do not walk away from God because of one thing. I guarantee you, if you will evaluate those situations, those people gave up on God, gave up on whatever, because something's been rocking along, and little by little it's been eating away at them. And this was just so to speak, the straw that broke the camel's back. This is the one thing that caused those people to give up. Or this is the last thing, I should say, because there are lots of things that have been built up. So look at that again. Take us the foxes, the little foxes that spoil the vines, for our vines have tender grapes. That is a poetic way of saying, let's evaluate our relationship and not let anything come between us. I like how things are going. Let's make sure that this grows. Let's make sure that there are not little things that come in between us. I have heard men complain because their wives squeezed the toothpaste from the middle of the tube instead of from the end. I mean, I'm serious. Angie just glanced in here at me. When a husband and wife break up and then they say it's because she squeezed the toothpaste from the middle of the tube instead of the end, they're not looking for solutions. They're not looking for answers, are they? I mean, what's the answer? Get 2 tubes of toothpaste. Is that simple or what? You're not going to use any more toothpaste in the family. Everybody's got their own toothpaste. Squeeze it the way you want to. We look at little silly things and we break that relationship down and we use those things. And that's what this is talking about. The little foxes that spoil the vines. Now, if you put out fresh, tender grapevines and they're starting to grow up, they will produce grapes even though they're lower to the ground. Little foxes can reach those. Little foxes will dig around where fresh dirt is, looking for grubs, and they'll also tear up the vines. They'll chew on the vines, and these little foxes are very destructive animals. You can have an entire crop of whatever it is, peanuts, corn, whatever you're growing, and one tiny little insect start coming in and destroy your entire crop. We've had a rare thing here, or I say rare, my entire life of gardening, I've never seen the stink bugs or squash bugs or whatever kind of bugs they are, a hard shell, shield looking bug. We've never had those like they are right now. They come in and they destroy everything. The squash, they come in, they bore into the vine, and they are destructive. So look for the little things tonight. I want you to think about, and I'm using primarily from husbands, from fathers, as the head of the house, what are the things that you could evaluate in your family, in your relationships, that could destroy. And like I said, I have very few scriptures. I'm not going to read a lot of scriptures tonight, but I want to go through a survey because I did a lot of study, and I found, and this I hope will shock you. I hope this gets your attention. In studies of teenagers raised in church their entire life, 60 to 80% of them walked away from the faith after college. 60 to 80%. I'm going to say 70% as average. Depending on which survey you look at, 70% of Christian-raised teenagers, when they went to college, they walked away from the faith. And then not just college, but when they moved out of the home and got away from mom and dad, bringing them to church, being a part of the family, that's what they do. So think about it. Why are 70% of young people walking away? And I wanted this to be all-inclusive. If you don't have teenagers right now, or if your teenagers are grown, if you're not even married, I want you to use this Bible study to think about your relationship with God and your relationship with someone else. I want you to think about the things that you will learn from this that will help you to grow and stay together with someone as a friend, as a spouse, and your relationship with God. Now, we often get into the doctrinal question, can a person lose their salvation? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about bringing up the question even if you can lose your salvation. I want us to look at someone who walks away from God, someone who has been raised in church their entire life. Now, in the Bible, foxes are sometimes used to represent separation or little things that come in. In Judges, Samson used foxes. He tied a firebrand to their tail or a torch to their tail. 300 foxes, he tied them tail to tail, and he destroyed or separated the field of the Philistines. In Nehemiah, the enemy Tobiah brought up to him to mock him, saying that the wall that they had, a fox climbing on it would break down the wall of stone. So there's a lot of hidden things in there like that. If you would think about it, the foxes are what we're looking at tonight. So I wanted to call this fox hunting, so you think about, let the Holy Spirit guide you and think about things. So I've got four primary reasons that always came back of reasons that young people walk away from God. Reasons that young people who've been raised in the church, went religiously, if you will, that they walked away. And then at the end of this, I want to give you some things that were the solutions, things that made a difference. And I'm going to give you these topics first. The first one is they left because they had troubling unanswered questions about the faith. They had troubling unanswered questions about the faith. The second is they left because Christian faith just wasn't working for them. That was the answer that they gave. They stopped going to church. They gave up on God because it just wasn't working for them anymore. The third thing was they left because they allowed other things to take priority. Got busy with life, new job coming up, relationships, moving, just got out of the habit, so to speak. And the fourth thing is they left because they really never personally owned the faith. They admitted they never really did have a personal connection. It really wasn't their faith. It was the faith of their father or their mother or their family, faith of grandfather, whoever. It was not something that they did. So we're going to read back over this, and one at a time. I'm going to give you some answers under these. So the first topic, they left because they had troubling unanswered questions about the faith. And talking to men as fathers primarily, we must look at every aspect of the faith. We need to make sure that we just don't throw out and expect them to believe blindly just because Dad said so or just because the pastor said so. We need to let them ask the questions that they can ask. Think of the things that some college professor or some really brilliant atheist buddy is going to ask them, and ask them those questions. Next point, have you spent time with your children or with your whoever we're talking about tonight in your life? Have you spent time with them looking at other religions? Think about it. Angie and I, when we were homeschooling the kids, we made a point of having a study of religions of the world because they need to know about that. Young people need to know about it. You need to know about it. Why do you believe what you believe? Think about it. Why do you believe the things that you believe? If I said, what do you believe? What's your doctrine? And you wrote it down, and then I ask you why. Why is that what you believe? Is that because that's what your denomination teaches? Is that because you've studied it? Have you compared, other religions? How do you're going to get asked the question sometime in your life, how do you know you're right and they're wrong? And if you get some young person going out into a college class and they get a professor who just looks brilliant, sounds brilliant, I mean, he just really impresses the people in his class. If you get that and they come out and ask, what makes you think your God is the only God? People all over the world are happy with their God. Why is your faith wrong? They need to know all about religions of the world. Have you allowed your children to ask the hard questions, or have you just simply put them in a class and let them listen and never ask questions? When we take them to regular church. They go in the sanctuary and they sit and listen to some kind of message. They hear a sermon. They don't ever get the opportunity to ask questions. If on the way home you change the subject and it's all about what restaurant are we going to go to, you know what, there's a ball game coming on tonight, or hey guys, how would you like to have a picnic? How about we go and do this afternoon? Let's go fishing. And you just immediately change the subject. You've missed out on a teachable moment. You have missed out on an opportunity to say, what do you think about that message? Or what do you think about what he talked about? And you're missing out on opportunities to let the questions come up. So they're going to get asked the questions. If you've not been asked the questions, you're going to get asked the questions. The questions need to be asked. Have you discussed creation versus evolution? Have you discussed evidence of the flood? How we know Jesus is Messiah? How we know the historical facts of Jesus? The things that you can study and look at, and the questions you can ask. Have you looked at those things? I guarantee you they're going to be asked. And guys, we need to make sure we have the answers. We need to make sure, instead of saying, you know, all right, son, we're going to church and this is what we believe. You know, Grandpa believed this. We're staunch Christians. This is our denomination. You know, we're whatever your denomination happens to be. And you never even know why you are a Baptist or a Methodist or Episcopal or Assembly of God. You don't even know what you believe. You need to know what you believe. You need to know why you're going to that church. It's not because the pastor is entertaining. It's not because you love the praise and worship music. I mean, seriously, folks, is that really the reason you're going to that church? You need to be going somewhere where you're fed. And if your children are going there because Dad likes the praise and worship music, you know, they've got a 70s rock sound to them, and Dad loves 70s rock. I can't believe the reasons people give for going to church. You need to be thinking about every question possible that they could possibly get asked out in the real world. They're not going to be in a cocoon when they grow up. They're not going to be there where you can quickly step in and stop that question from happening. If your children in high school, whatever age they are, have been living a sheltered life, and they get, and some of the atheists will say, well, they didn't fall away, they just got educated. Well, you know what? We all got opinions, and we're all biased, and I'm biased toward the Bible, and we need to make sure that our children know why we're biased, why we think that's the truth. Okay? So the topic was, they left because they had troubling unanswered questions about the faith. Dad, husband, get the answers. Okay? Get the answers. Next topic. They left because their faith was not working for them. Okay. I've seen a lot of youth groups. Used to be a youth pastor. Know a lot of youth activities that go on even today, even though I'm older and not connected with youth much anymore. What kind of youth group are they connected in, or are they connected in a youth group? Are they in something that is working their faith? Are they going to pizza parties and lock-ins where they watch the Three Stooges or something, you know, movies? Or are they having a spiritual renewal and revival in their life? If they've left because their faith's not working, it's not working for them, then that means it never got a chance to work. It's sort of like this. Men go to boot camp before they go off to war. They train. If there's a war going on, they don't just train for 90 days and go off to war. They train a lot before they put them in the front lines. Why are we treating our children that way? Why are we allowing children to basically go to boot camp and just turn them loose out to war? We should be making sure that their faith gets worked, that they actually have to struggle. I know that for a lot of parents, that irritates them to think, my precious little child is going to have to suffer. I don't want my child to ever suffer. And of course, we don't want them to be hurt when they're growing up. We protect them all the ways we can. But you cannot protect them from falling on bicycles, and you cannot protect them from getting picked on in school. They need to be able to grow up and be strengthened. So if they left because their faith wasn't working for them, it means, Dad, you didn't ever let their faith work in them. You never let them see the trials of life. You stepped in too quick. You got them out of trouble. You stepped in and you didn't ever let them experience any kind of pain or suffering. Right? I mean, I'm trying to be honest with you tonight. I failed in those aspects myself, and my children suffered the consequences because of it. Dads, you have to let your children learn faith. You have to let them struggle. If they get a speeding ticket, they have to pay for it. They've got to work it off. I mean, on and on we can think about that. Their faith needs to be tested. Right? They need to see faith working in you. You know, you get sick, you get relationship problems, you get money issues. They need to know some things are going on. They need to know that the family's struggling. And so many times we just keep pouring out money to the kids instead of letting them know, you know, look, times are hard right now. We don't have the money. Pray that Dad can get another job. Pray that Dad or whatever, and let your children see, let them grow up, see you fighting the faith. Let them know the real events. Don't try to shelter them, you know, until they're 18 years old. Send them off to college. They get into, you know, the first semester, they get into some kind of battle, some kind of money issues, and all of a sudden it's a great big shock to them. They need to make sure that their faith is worked. All right, here's one more thing I want to tell you. Their Bible studies growing up need to be relevant. And I'm going to, actually, my next Bible study for this, just to give you a little teaser, so to speak, my next Bible study is going to be possible Bible studies for your family. I don't know any question I get asked more from fathers and husbands than, what can I use to help my family study the Bible? To give me some ideas, give me some topics. Because if we think about it, there are all kinds of things to study. Now you have heard things, if you were raised in church, you've heard all kinds of Bible studies, and you probably heard hundreds of Bible studies that were not relevant. They were interesting, yes. You left there with a smile on, yes. But 2 days later, you couldn't remember what the pastor talked about. I went to a church many years ago for almost 10 years. And when I left that church, it was about 6 months later, I got to thinking about it, and I thought, out of 10 years of sermons, I remember one sermon. Out of 10 years of sermons, I remember one sermon. One sermon. Out of 10 years at a church, what are your young people getting out of church? Are they falling asleep? Are they passing notes? Are they even paying attention? What are your children getting out of church? The Bible studies need to be relevant. You need to, as father, be leading your family in devotion, and they need to be relevant devotions. I mean, yes, you can pick a Bible study and get started, but please try to make sure that they are getting relevant things from the Bible. By relevant, I mean don't just throw out there, and here's the story of the time that the axe floated and the prophet prayed and it came up and the man got it. I mean, that's an interesting story and it's in the Bible, yes. The time that Balaam's donkey talked to him and crushed his foot against the wall, and, you know, then Balaam argued with the donkey, and then he saw an angel with a flaming sword. You know, that there are so many interesting things in the Bible, and yet they've got to be relevant. Don't just read a story. And this is our Bible study for this week. So make sure they've got relevant Bible studies. By the time that your teenagers or your young children are college age, many have seen hypocrites and charlatans in church. If they grow up in the church, they will see the faults of the people. You know, think about it. The first time that you go to church, everybody looks like a saint. Everybody looks like that they are really people of God. And then if you start going to some of the events of the church, hanging around after the church service is over, you begin to realize they're just humans. And you and I as adults can connect with that. We're human too. We understand that we're still growing. We're all at different levels. But your children may not understand that if they grow up and they thought that this great man of God, I mean, even up to the pastor, if they think that this great man of God, then they realize that he said something he shouldn't have said, or did something that, or something comes out of his mouth from the pulpit. I mean, I've been in churches where pastors embarrass themselves because of what they said. They're human. They have faults. Your young people need to know that. They need to know that, you know, yeah, that there's people in the church with problems. That's why they're in church. Amen. So we need to make sure that our young people understand that there are people in church that are, they're the tares among the wheat. There are people in church that are baby Christians, and maybe they are in leadership, but they're still baby Christians. And we need to help them understand that so that they don't go off and start thinking, you know what? Now that I think about it, I don't remember a single perfect person in church. So church just doesn't work. Make sure that they understand that. Next, this is number 3. They left because they allowed other things to take priority. And I've got very little for this, except when your children move away, they don't need to be disconnected from you. They don't need to let it not be a priority. They need to be connected in with a college ministry or some connection with a church. If they're in another city, they need to be connected very quickly. You have been tying strings with them their whole life, hopefully. You have been making a connection, a relationship as father. You have been connecting with them their whole lives. You need to not let those strings get cut. You know, the distance can break a few strings. Not talking in a while can break a few strings. But you need to make sure that you keep contact with your young children, their college-age children. You need to make sure that you call them. I call my parents very seldom, and I don't talk to them and see them like I need to. But I have such a relationship with them that when I call again, things are going to be just like they were the last time. That takes place. That takes time to do that. Dad, you can still be dad after they move out and after they become adults. You're still father, and you can still give advice. Now, my children are almost 30 and up. You know, my youngest is in mid to late 20s, and you know, I've got a son that's getting in the later 30s, and my children still come to me for advice. They still ask me questions. They still call me up. They still message me looking for some help, looking for some advice. That's a good sign. If you got young people that move away and they don't ask for help anymore. I mean, I know sometimes they ask for money help. You know, they move off to college, they ask for money help. Need a little help with some money? You need to make sure that it's not just money you help them with. Make sure that they've got spiritual guidance. Check on them. Make sure that they're not being surrounded by wolves. And the last thing is, they left because they never personally owned the faith. Okay, this is number 4. They left because they never personally owned the faith. So ask yourself this question. Does your son or daughter ever have a life-changing, born-again relationship with Christ? Have they ever been born again? Ask yourself, have you ever had that relationship? Have you ever been connected with Christ? Because it needs to start with you, Dad. It needs to start with you, husband. If you have not had a real born-again, life-changing relationship or life-changing experience with Christ, an epiphany, if you will, if you've never had something that just made you realize that He is Lord and Savior and that you need to give your heart to Him. If you've never had that, then you need to be saved and you need to be born again. And if you are, you need to make sure they are. Just because they go to youth rallies, just because they go to lock-ins, just because they go off to youth retreats and they had a great time at the swimming pool, and we sang Kumbaya, and we all lit candles. I've been to all those things. When I was a teenager, I went to a Baptist church. We went and we sang Kumbaya. And I'm not trying to make light of that. That was our spiritual experience. We had emotional things that took place. It needs to be more than emotional. It needs to be more in your life and their life. That thing said they never personally own the faith. They need to personally own it. It needs to be a life-changing decision. So ask your son or daughter, have you been born again? We often talk about personal evangelism in the church. Have you really talked to your son or daughter and asked them if they've been born again? I mean, think about it. We think about going out in the world and being on the mission field, passing out tracts. Have you talked to your own family about it? Have you? We need to make sure that family members are born again. Is your family going to church just because you do? Just because it's something that the family's always done? And also, are you, Dad, just dropping them off? Or are you having your wife drop them off because the ball game happens to come on that night? Or because you really had rather go off hunting or fishing or doing whatever men do instead of going to church? Have you really ever been taking them to church, or are you dropping them off? When I was a youth pastor, very few parents brought their kids and stayed in the service while the youth was in the youth service. Very few parents. I realized a lot of them work midweek services, but most of them didn't work Wednesday evenings, which is when it was. Dads, you need to be there. They need to make sure they see you there. And finally, on this bullet, we need to make sure that they get involved in church. Not just attend, not just listen to the messages, but that they actually get involved. And by that I mean they can be involved in ministry long before college. Have you got your young people in volunteer programs? Have you got them in youth ministry where they're actually mentoring someone? You see, that they will make it be personal when they get involved in it, when they are turned over to do the work, when they are put in a position where they've got to start leading Bible studies. And I often challenge the son-in-laws, my son, and my family to lead Bible study. And I told this a few weeks ago when I was first put in a youth group many years ago. This was back in the mid-'80s. They said, okay, you got the service next week. We're going to give you your first time to lead the study. And I said, well, okay, what do I get a book? Do I have a lesson, Sunday school lesson, or what? And he said, no, you just share whatever you're studying right now. And it put me on the spot because guess what? I hadn't been studying it right now. So I had to play catch up. All of a sudden start studying the Bible so I could start sharing with somebody else. And when your young people start having to share this, when they start having to share their faith, giving opportunities to share their faith, it becomes personally owned. They own the faith. They can be taken to nursing homes to minister, missions trips. You have all kind of ministries that take place during Christmas time. Church maintenance, a very, very overlooked field where your son may want to get involved, even your daughter may get involved, cutting the grass. The church may have somebody that can do that. How about the shut-ins, and how about the elderly that are connected with your church, or even in your own community? We've had people down through the years in our neighborhoods that were shut in, widows that had no way to take care of themselves, and we brought them to church often. Sometimes we went over and cut their grass. We would go to the store and buy groceries for them. Your young people can do that. They can get connected. It can be something that they actively do. And when they do that, before they go off to college, before they walk out in life, that has become part of them. Our daughters, when we were homeschooling, they were part of Red Cross. They went and volunteered at Red Cross. There was an equestrian stable that was for the deaf and blind school in Talladega, and our daughters volunteered on that. Lots of volunteer things. They went to nursing home once a month, and I mentioned that in one of the Bible studies a few weeks ago. We need to make sure young people are involved in this, and when they are, then it will be something that's part of them, and they will carry it through life. So there are 4 factors. I'm gonna close. 4 factors that were the most predictive in determining when teenagers stayed in church. Number 1, they wanted the church to help guide their decisions in everyday life prior to leaving the home. They wanted the church to be part of the decisions. So think about that. Do your young children at home want the church to be part of the decision? Do they want that to be part of them? If you've got a son that's just going, he never talks about church, he goes, yes, that's fine, yeah, okay, we'll get ready, I'll get ready. He is doing nothing more than silently waiting on the day when he doesn't have to do that anymore. And so you can evaluate that, Dad. The second one, their parents were still married to each other and both attended church. So while your kids are at home, if there's divorce, if there's single parents, it makes it much harder on them. They want to see mom and dad is making it. Remember, a husband and wife is symbolic of Christ in the church. So what are we telling our children if we divorce? What are we telling our children if the family breaks up? What are we telling our children if the husband and wife can't get along? You know, we're telling them, well, this is symbolic of Christ in the church. That's what they see. It's a lot like being an abusive father. You know, we're telling our children, you know, he's the heavenly father. So they're seeing the earthly father as some abusive ogre. So how do you think they're going to relate to the heavenly father? Make sure that you keep your relationship with your wife straight so your children's sake. The third one is the pastor's sermons were relevant to their lives. Now, I can't tell you need to leave the church you're in, but dad, husband, you need to make sure your family is attending a church where you can get the meat of the word, where you can get spiritually fed when you go. Make sure that you are going somewhere that is teaching the Word of God and not giving something that is not practical for you or your children or your wife. You have got to make sure that it is relevant. I mean, think about all the things I just said about that. There were 10 years of 3 times a week sermons that I heard 3 times a week. You know, Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. 10 years of that, and I remembered one message. I remember it to this day what it was. I remember it. I remember the passage it came from, and it was something that I really took to heart, something that was useful for me. How many messages can you remember? If you're going to a church, how many messages can you remember? And then take that further. How many do you think your children are remembering? So make sure that the pastor's sermons, when they're growing up, are relevant to their lives. And the last one is there was at least one adult that intervened in their life and made a significant investment in them personally and spiritually prior to leaving the home. And what that means is they could have a teacher, they could have a Sunday school teacher, they could have a football coach, they could have somebody that is not a parent that took an interest in them. Might be one of the neighbors that was in a hobby. And now I can just tell you about who it was in my life. I had a high school teacher who was a amateur radio operator, a ham radio operator, and back then that was a big deal before the internet, when you could get on and you could use Morse code and you could talk to someone on the other side of the world with a home-built radio. And I was in the 9th grade, and he started this class to teach Morse code and electronics, and that got me started in the career I'm in. And this man made a huge difference. Now, he was a pastor, and he taught with me sometimes on a spiritual level, but he dealt with me on a personal level. He treated me as an adult. He spent time with me. And it made a huge difference in my life of setting my course in the direction I needed to go. It kept me out of trouble. And if your young children have somebody else besides mom or dad, and it's great if mom and dad's there, and that's the way it should be. But if your children have somebody, a teacher at school, an uncle even, somebody in your family, some older adult who comes in, a grandfather, comes in and makes an investment in their lives, then that is a sure grounding thing for them to stay on the straight and narrow path. So, I said all that, and I'm going to finish up by reminding you that next week I'm going to go through some topics for Bible study. I'm going to go through, I get a lot of men say, okay, what can I do a family Bible study about? What can I, if I want to do a devotion with my family, what can I do it on? Well, obviously you have the internet to search. You can get on Google and put family devotions, and you'll find lots of things. I want to give you some things that I think are practical, some ideas, some things that I've done through the years, some topics, and some things that I think you will find are useful for your family. Many years ago, I started a website. It's been up nearly 20 years now. Now we've primarily moved over to Facebook Live, where we do videos. Sunday morning we do our live worship service. But 20 years ago, a man emailed me after seeing the website and said, "We don't have a current church. I would like to keep my family in the Bible. Can you give me some ideas?" And I started writing up my messages and putting them on this website. And I did it week after week, and it took hours because I typed like this, you know. And I was glad to do it because I knew somebody was using it. So I've done those for 20 years, and I'm not trying to brag or anything, but I'm trying to tell you that men do need something to go by. They need some kind of structure. Point me in the right direction. So next week, that's going to be my topic, relevant Bible studies for your family. And God bless. I appreciate you watching this evening. I'm going to let it run just a little bit longer because there is a delay in the broadcast. Thank you, Rod. Bless you, Sonny. Good to see you on. William. Love you, Haley.